We are to be beacons of hope and truth. We are to stand against injustice. We are to stand for peace. We are to work against the permitting of the harm of innocence. We are to find a way to provide a greater future for the coming generations of humanity upon the face of this existence, so as they are not to stand to inherit the debts of our issues and the debts of our mistakes and the debts of our failures. This is the truth of how prosperity raises up the collective consciousness of the totality of the experience that we're all sharing. Right now, we are divided against one another, and a house that's divided against itself shall not stand. We as a humanity do not seem to stand the level to the level of success that we may wish or to have or may have hoped to. Right now, we're seeing that the populations in the United States are being pressed to believe that their vote is what's going to make a way for the future of humanity. We could clearly see that none of what we have done in the past has ever made a way towards prosperity. None of our votes have never made a change in the quality of life that we export with our military power and might. It's such a powerful force. We have to truly understand what $960 billion a year is. You're on a ride that you didn't ask to get on. You were just born on top of. And you have to stay on that ride. And wherever that ride takes you, you're going to be forced to endure the full blunt of it. And we have to be mindful as to realize that we cannot stand up against this massive entity and force in any of the conventional ways in which we might imagine we're ourselves standing up against it. It's almost a brute form and sign of power to rise up and squash such a minute and insignificant bug. But perhaps when things become personal, that is exactly the steps taken. And that is precisely the manner in which you were never this loud, you never talk this much, but now you speak loud as non-stop. It's so weird. See, the $960 billion a year that's spent by the military industrial complex, they have their intention and their agenda. You see, everyone's busying movement for the collective hive, the mega power, the forces of nature. You know, we have to truly take a moment to grasp what these things actually are and what they mean. and how they affect us. What do these things actually mean? They mean that all of our short and insignificant lives are all lived to feed the mega godhead of the metropolis, the military industrial monster. Everybody has been enslaved and raptured and captured. Uh, Slavery never ended. It just transferred to the backs of all free man and woman, all of them collectively. And they said, well, if you don't want to allow these other people to carry the burden that we've all been forced to endure, then you'll get your fair share of that burden yourself. And that's precisely where we are, carrying that burden. And there's no problem with that. That's how it should be. All that has to be done is we have to correct the mistakes and the errors codes and the variables that are wrong and in incorrect standing, and then we can get to the point where everything can be fixed and resolved and corrected, like, easily. That's what we have to do. That's what we really have to do. We have to get back to that point where we just correct all these little mistakes and these little wrongs, make them right, correct them. But the problem is like it seems like the vast majority of people are asleep and too sedated and too comfortable and too unconcerned. They're busy with their own lives and their own personal problems and affairs, and so there's no time for them to have any true or genuine interest for the affairs of humanity. There's no way for anybody to have any genuine interest for the cares of our future. We're just, each generation is just living its life, and they've eradicated the previous generations to make us less aware of the cues for how to know when something is being engineered and propped up against us. They've done their best to make sure that we are completely unaware of whatever it is that's being engineered, that those people who might have been able to say, hey, don't let them do this, don't let them do this to us, those people are gone now. And you're going to become those people who has to realize what's being done in this world and why for the reasons it's being done for, and who's inspired such actions, and how such, in the scenarios and the end games of all these different situations. I didn't want these things to be true because it's terrifying, it's nightmarish. Like, we could look at it like, oh, well, they just made a mistake. It was a mistake they made, things went the wrong way, and that's just simply it. There's nothing else that we can do about it, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the way that things are. That's what we have to live with at this time. But it wasn't on purpose, but that's just not the case. None of it's the case. And it's scary to talk about these things because they wanted to split our minds into thinking, I want to talk about these things, but what if I talk about these things? Then is it going to make me a person of interest again? Is it going to make them come after me and pursue me? And all these things are very traumatizing, terrifying, traumatic in nature, and that they're fine with that. That's exactly how they want things to go. That's exactly what they want to be the case. And the problem is that we can't live in that kind of a world where we are forced to live with that type of a mindset constantly. It's not fair. It's not healthy. It's not appropriate. And it's one of the tools they're using to stop us from being able to direct and steward our future. You see, they really are. It's so funny for us to say they aren't. We have to see our own power. We have to see our own strength. We have to see our own ability and capacity and a way and means to have a positive outcome from this otherwise negative scenario. It does not require violence. It does not require inciting any form of violence or inviting any type of violence. But that is, again, part of their game. Is that of all the things that have to be done to correct the situations that we live in today in this common era, it is of critical pivotal importance that we realize that, as I mentioned earlier, all of the wrongs that are thus being set in motion must be undone. Must be undone. We have to learn to live in balance, and we have to free the oppressed. That's such a big mathematical equation. I can't lose hope, and I can't lose focus nor determination of the positive potential outcomes of this entire and total scenario. I have to be as positive as possible in realizing that there is a path, and there are the pivotal key players and assisting all of this to unfold itself and take place at its rational and appropriate and timely time. It's going to happen, but it's going to require effort, consistent vigilance towards this unified goal, and it's going to require that people set not only apart their differences, but their own personal whims and desires per the concept of there are bigger things at hand and greater tasks that we must focus our attention on collectively so that as to allow for a path to form itself towards our liberation and towards our exodus. It's strange. It's very difficult because before we are being allowed to even present this scenario, we have been workshopped, we have been gamed and tested, and simulations have been ran out in real time to provoke the population into seeing their responses, and the nature of these simulations are going to grow in nature exponentially in the near and immediate future. Refer to the film Brazil for further indication and reference to the points of what I'm bringing note to. They're going to, as many have begun to suggest already, regardless of the turnout of the election, they're going to formulate and incite and engineer even greater acts of chaos and division so as to use it as a means of fear to force people into giving up more and more of their freedoms and rights as they have typically done. But this is all collectively towards, it's all moving collectively towards a common and genuine goal and interest. We're going to get our biometric based voting systems. And then from that moment, therefore, they're going to attach us to our internet presence and profile, and then our search inquiries and history and all this will be kept monitored as just a matter of natural protocol because they're already keeping track of who we are and where we are on the internet. Our internet IDs will match our true ID systems. The next step from there will to privately and unbeknownst to the public rate and categorize each of our behaviors and online activities until a time comes when certain moves will be made to disarm the vast majority of the public, and at this time they will have known and marked clearly those threats that stand in opposition to such efforts, and that will be the time when the vast majority of those individuals will be confronted. It will begin a quick and swift process of disarming the rest of the militias and dissidents, and that's why they've been honeypotted in so many various ways, and why we've been given different forms of platforms of social media interaction and free speech when none of those things are in the least bit true. There is a oversight committee responsible for limiting people's reach and growth and access to the public on the internet, and they say these things are for the safety and the interests of in the security of the public, both against foreign and domestic adversaries, because you may say something that could compromise or jeopardize an agent or a what is it called? Like an undercover operation. There we go, operation. And so, even unintentionally, you can say something that will easily convict you by from only having first-hand knowledge place you at the scene of the crime, even though you just came up with these things. Be careful, you don't know the nature of your psychic ability. But I do not wish to digress in any form here. It's very complicated because it feels very threatening to speak out in the nature of such things. Because as I just mentioned, that's when a swift and quick and efficient movement will be made against all these people. You'll see teams break out and raid houses and compounds and properties and estates and ranches, but they're creating a whole plethora of different types of threats that they can perpetuate a forever war here in the states, so as to legitimize their ever increasing budgets and the thoughts and the atmosphere of an ever growing presence or threat. This is why it is that they will be able to legitimate and substantiate even more border patrol agencies and agents, but also traffic stops to look for your legal right papers, your documents, and depending on who comes into office, again, just because there is a huge migrating population, it doesn't mean that that population in itself is necessarily meant to be used against the previous occupants. If there is a major conflict that even begins before the November election that's coming ever so soon, and this is just a lull right before this massive blow up and storm, then that can easily become a frontline force against whatever adversary that may be wishing to enter and threaten the well being of the American public and its international population. So, they're instigating and fabricating food shortages. They're doing a lot of things. Many of these things, if you study the pattern and the historical record, many of these things that we're observing now that are happening and taking place have taken place preceding the vast majority of wars in our near and immediate histories. Every time there's been major wars and conflicts, there's been all these different types of behaviors that you're observing now. And as you see the escalating events between Israel and Russia and Iran and China, and Israel's greatest ally, of course, being that which is the United States of America, it's easy for it to fit that specific narrative. But who, in fact, knows what's taking place behind the curtain in the background in relationship to all of the other different countries and superpower nations, and whether they have previously established agreements to, hey, we're going to do this for the purpose of reducing populations, allocating mass corporations and manpower, and socially engineering a next dystopian era. Once the ash and the dust all settles, a new humanity, a new group of world superpowers, and that's why Israel has to hurry up and get their job done, because when this new utopian society is established, Nasara Jasara, things of that nature, things like international or intercontinental or inter superpower conflicts will no longer be permitted. So the kingdoms of those who wish to establish their kingdoms must be done so in a quick and timely manner, so as to clear the table of any wrongdoing and start anew and afresh. We have to create certain last period boogeymen to ensure to legitimize the acts and efforts and actions of certain otherwise illegitimate governments and occupiers. And in that same concept, since such things have been justified and legitimated, they will never have to be pursued in a court of, international justice. And these things can all be behind us and under the blood, one might say. And that is, in fact, where we are now. And these are the different paths that lay before us of how these things may potentially play out. It's simple as that. I hate that it is no different, or no, that is the truth, and that is all there is to it. And the only part C to this conversation is that this threat could grow greater than that which is just the greater Israel project, and it could truly at some point expand into something that comes into the United States of America, and our one-time greatest ally could show itself to be, in fact, our greatest threat and the greatest form of harm could potentially befall us in the near and immediate futures. So, if our greatest ally soon proves to be our greatest threat, it will be a profound realization indeed. Because right now, the way they're setting us up, it will appear at one point that we have no other allies left because all the other allied superpowers have been turned against us because of our association with the illegitimate government and occupiers of that pre-aforementioned nation. So they might be kind of doing an amazing double bridge burnout triple cross where they're ruining our reputation intentionally so that there's nobody left for us to rely or turn to. And that's where the American people have to realize that that's the threat that it lies right before us now, clearly. That if we don't take the opportunity to do something now, then there may be no opportunity for us in the future otherwise. This might be it. This might be where America loses its not only its place on the world stage and standing and reputation, but also respect and honor. It may be lost indeed forever. We're not just the stupidest nation in the world and the fattest, most disgusting nation. We're also the most powerful and yet simultaneously weakest and most powerless nation to ever exist. Give us a thumbs up if you like this, if you enjoy this, if you're hearing this in the future. Share it. It's short, it's impactful because it's direct and it's honest and it's sincere, and it's going to be almost bulletproof as time presents itself. You're going to be the one to see that this is in fact what's happening, why it's happening, how it's happening, and what the future holds for us. Either our greatest ally will become our greatest threat internally and externally, and already is and has been and will continue to be so, or the world will live in prosperity after the genocide of a few more nations because everybody wants their piece of the pie, and they'll be damn right sure to get it before things come to an end.